We can see a man named Bernard is in the courtroom fighting a case. We can see a flashback from 1939 Texas. A little black boy Bernard is shining shoes. But if we see, he chooses to set up his stall in front of the bank. He works slowly so he can hear the financial secrets white people are talking about. As they leave, the boy writes everything down on his notebook. He wants to gather all the financial information to create his dream life. In 1939, black people are oppressed by severe discrimination. His father tells him sadly that his dream is impossible, but Bernard is determined. 15 years later, he moves to LA with his wife, Eunice, and children. He decides to start his business here. The family of 3 is living in a room of their relatives. He starts as a real estate agent and searches for houses for sale everywhere in the city. Through his observation, he finds that the black community in Los Angeles is overcrowded, while the white community still has many empty houses. Black people have rental needs and financial strength, but there is no market. He sees this as a great business opportunity. He sees a white-owned apartment with not a very great condition. He sees that as opportunity. He goes to the owner and give him a proposal, that he will give $30,000 now, and another $5,000 when he will rent out all the rooms. The owner admires his idea, he doesn't want to do risky business. Bernard expresses his understanding. Before leaving, he suddenly glances at the owner's calendar, which shows that it is given by a local bank manager. So an idea comes to his mind. He says goodbye to the owner and goes to the bank directly, where he finds the manager who sent the calendar. The manager's secretary, who discriminates against black people, refuses to introduce him to the manager. He waits for a few hours at the bank door, and when the manager comes out, he stops him immediately. Bernard says, "I know one of your VIP customers. The business will benefit me and you as well, so can you approve a loan for me?" But the bank manager rejects him without thinking. That night, he receives a call from the owner. The owner asks him, "Did you use my name to try to get a loan?" He apologized to the owner. The owner doesn't blame him, but admires his belief that he will not give up until his goal is achieved. The owner decides to guarantee the loan for him, so he gets the first loan in his life from the bank and buys the property. An old white lady has just come home from shopping when she sees Bernard. She asks, "What are you doing at my house?" Bernard answers calmly, "I'm renovating the apartment building." The old lady speaks with a mean face. "Workers like you should be careful." Bernard says, "Don't worry, this is my building and I will definitely take good care of it." The old lady goes home angrily and the police come soon after. They tell Bernard that an old lady called. They ask Bernard if he is pretending to be the owner of the house. Bernard takes out a copy of the real estate certificate. The police realize that the house really belongs to him, so they leave. That night, Bernard returns to the apartment building. The old lady at the door sees him and immediately tells him to get out because it is not the time for renovation. Bernard says, "I am not a renovation worker now. I am the owner." The old lady is shocked and a few days later she moves out from there. Bernard rents out her house to a black lady. The market is huge, as he has researched earlier. The building is quickly filled and Bernard gives the negotiated follow-up payment to the former owner. The former owner admires Bernard very much and offers to start a business with him. Bernard chooses the house and calculates the income, and the old owner negotiates the transaction and signs the contract. With him in front, white people won't know that they are doing business with Bernard. And they both can share equal profits. The plan works and they make a lot of money. Bernard also moves to a mansion shortly after. He just wants to create maximum profits. The former owner, who works with Bernard, dies suddenly a few years later. His equity in the company is inherited by his wife. This woman severely discriminates against black people and doesn't want to work with Bernard. She offers to buy his share at a very low price, and if he is not ready, she will sue him. Bernard is not willing to be treated so unfairly, so he decides to go to court. But he had to find someone to testify, to prove his cooperative relationship with the old owner. He thinks of the bank manager, but the manager has already cooperated with the widow and avoids Bernard. Extremely disappointed, Bernard stands in the bank and looks around. He is facing all this issue just because of his skin color. As he is thinking of this, a plan appears in his mind. There are 4 banks in one building, and each of them has closed doors for him. So he says, I will buy this building and see who of you dares to discriminate against me again. So Bernard finds Joe, another black real estate developer in Los Angeles, and tells him his plans. Joe thinks he is out of his mind because the land price of the building is extremely high, and never has a black person ever bought land in LA downtown. But after discussing it for a while, Joe realizes if they buy the building, the banks will serve them. They will easily get loans. Joe is extremely wealthy, he is also subject to white people everywhere. If he can step on white bankers on white land, he will make more money. However, they still cannot negotiate with white people directly, so they need a white person as an agent. Bernard already has an idea in mind, Matt, who has been helping him with renovations. This guy is an honest man. He's also very ambitious, just a little inexperienced. So Bernard and Joe set out to train Matt, teaching him golf, high-class manners, mathematical thinking, and real estate. Matt quickly learns golf. While playing golf, Matt meets the owner of the bank building. The conversation goes well. Matt gets the chance to buy the building and the rest will be negotiated. Bernard helps Matt make all the preparations. He first counts the number of lights on in the building after dark, calculates the vacancy rate of the building, and then gets the building estimate value. Through the building's annual revenue and operating costs, Bernard prepares the exact numbers of valuation, and asks Matt to memorize these numbers before meeting with the owner. As Matt goes to meet the owner, he is overestimating the value of the property, but Matt knows the exact value and he came up with exact numbers, which shocks the owner. They all think that they have encountered a genius and can't fool him. Bernard gets the building that is initially priced at more than $2.4 million for just $1.56 million. Whenever Bernard goes in or out of the building, the president of every bank will come to shake his hand. The little manager who made things difficult for him in the past is shocked. With the support of the banking industry, Bernard and Joe's real estate careers expand rapidly. Several years later, in 1963, Bernard takes his family back to Texas to visit his father. His father tells Bernard that he's proud of him. Bernard walks around town with his son, and they go to bank, where Bernard worked as a shoeshine boy. Texas was the most racist place in America. They meet a young boy, shining shoes, just like Bernard used to when he was little. The boy only work on the shoes of white people. This little incident touches Bernard and awakens his sense of responsibility to his community. He makes up his mind to help the black community in his hometown get better housing. Bernard visits Joe and tells him that they should buy the Mainland Bank in Texas. Joe thinks Bernard is out of his mind for even thinking about it because the racism in Texas is so severe. Bernard tells Joe his plan. Joe agrees to help Bernard out. They recruit Matt again and use him to be their frontman once more. They meet with the bank owner. Despite Florence Jr.'s suspicions, Sr. sells the bank to Matt and his partners. Now Bernard is helping African Americans in town to get loans. Things go well for a time until Florence Jr. starts investigating the loans that their bank approves. One day, Florence follows Matt and meets up with Bernard and Joe. He confronts them about the loans they approved and threatens them with a letter from the U.S. Treasury Department. He says that the department will inspect the bank's operations in 1 month. Matt comes up with a suggestion. He suggests that they buy another bank and transfer the problem loans from Mainland to that bank. They discuss the purchase of the Bank of Marlon Moore, and Bernard says the main problem is overseeing the operations of the bank. In response, Matt suggests that they allow him to run the bank. Bernard expresses his discomfort with the idea, but he agrees in the end. Matt gets to run his bank just like he wanted. Matt meets up with a lawyer and starts signing loan contracts on his signal. Matt receives a call from Florence Jr. regarding clients that want to withdraw all their money from the bank. To make matters worse, a federal bank examiner arrives at Marlon. To help Matt, Bernard forces himself to dress up as a janitor so he can get close during the meeting. Unfortunately, it doesn't make a difference since the examiner discovers a critical problem on several loans. Bernard is in disbelief that the absurd loans got approved. Eventually, they learned that it was Florence Jr.'s doing. It turns out that while rushing to run his bank, Matt skipped protocols and used a lawyer that Florence recommended through that Florence was able to sneak in the problematic loans. Bernard and Joe tell Matt that the most rational move they can make is to walk away from the Bank of Marlin. Unwilling to let his bank go, Matt makes a move without letting his partners know. Joe learns about his move the next day and rushes to Mainland Bank with Bernard. They confront Matt about the loans. Bernard tells Matt to get their books, but it's too late. The federal bank examiners arrive to revoke Mainland Bank's license to operate. While leaving the building, the FBI arrests Bernard and Joe. Bernard and Joe meet up with their lawyer. They learned that their case got dragged along with some racial politics in the country. Matt talks with Senator McClellan about testifying against his partners in exchange for his freedom. Matt contemplates his next move that night and makes a phone call. Matt follows McClellan's suggestions and testifies against his partners at the Senate hearing the next day. Later that day, Bernard also meets with McClellan and listens to his proposal. He gives him a choice to take an immunity deal and confirm Matt's testimonies, or Bernard can say whatever he wants and go to jail. In the end, he talks about racial discrimination in the country. After the hearing, the two also got sentenced to federal prison. Florence Jr. purchases the Mainland Bank for a small fraction of the price paid by Bernard and Joe. Meanwhile, Matt Steiner never got charged with any crime. Several years later, Bernard and Joe get out of prison. Eunice finds it strange that the two men seem happy even after losing all their fortune. It turns out that's not the case at all. Joe reveals that they have properties next to each other in the Bahamas. It turns out that the man Matt called the night before his testimony was Bernard. He told Bernard about the senator's deal and apologized to him. In return, Bernard asked Matt a favor before the government could seize their assets. The movie ends. We have come a long way about discrimination.